Hello and welcome to the next episode of DDR. It's a podcast all about your favorite Drow, Drizzt Do'Urden. My name is Justin, and in this episode, we will be diving deep into Chapter 6 of Homeland, titled Two Hands, discussing all of our favorite plot points, characters, and more.
And my name is Jeffrey. If you've made it this far in the podcast, you should know that we're really big fans of Dungeons and Dragons. So one of the things that we like to do is go ahead and discuss how the chapter is going to relate to our favorite tabletop game.
Following along with the show is easy. Just grab a copy of the book, read the next chapter, and tune in every week. But remember, we want to hear your thoughts too, so you can share your favorite parts of the chapter via email at drizztdoneright@gmail.com.
Or better yet, allow us to extend to you a formal invitation to be part of the ongoing discussion on our very own Discord, Drizzt Done Right. You can find the Discord invitation inside the link of the podcast description. If you can go ahead and raise yourself an interesting point about the chapter, we could bring you up on this show. Well, maybe the next show or the one that follows. We've had a few new people pop into our Discord, and I wanted to shout out Sevik the Grey, Bolvy, Rogue Squirrel, and Bearman. Welcome to the Underdark. We are glad to have you.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost at 50 people in our Discord. I think the last I checked, we're at like 47, 48. It's really taken off, man.
I mean, it's essentially a large enough group to properly start a riot.
Yeah, right?
We don't have an invading Drow force just yet and able to overthrow House Devere, but we are working on it.
We are getting close. So, Jeffrey, how are you doing lately?
Pretty good. I actually just got done eating dinner a little bit ago. For all of our foodies out there, I made myself a nice honey and garlic shredded chicken, homemade mashed potatoes with a little cream cheese in there, and some roasted broccoli. Fantastic.
Awesome. Sounds delicious.
Again, fat kid likes to eat. I just like to say that. Fat kid, that's me, likes to eat.
No. We had pork carnitas for dinner tonight. Had some pork carnitas on some rice with some cheese. One of my favorite meals that Sarah makes.
Carnitas is a fun play and a good way to use up pork. I really do enjoy it because you can use it inside of like a tortilla. You can put it on a bowl.
Oh, man.
It's very versatile.
And we did it all. Like we've had leftovers for a few days now. And yeah, we've had it in burritos, in bowls, on eggs, you know, like.
I love it. One of the things I love to do is cook, and I like to just put a little bit of extra effort into most of the things I like to do. Hopefully, our listeners notice that when we give them this wonderful podcast.
Yeah, well, talking about this podcast, let's jump right in. Here we have a special segment, and we probably should have started episode 1 off with this as well, but we kind of ignored it and forgot about it. But here, we're going to jump into a new segment, a special segment that shows up at the beginning of every part of the book. We are starting part 2 of Homeland, and we're going to jump right into the insight check. Now we are going to roll an insight check to investigate the inner monologue of Drizzt. So here in part 2 of Homeland, we have a letter from Drizzt, or an inner monologue from Drizzt, titled The Weapons Master. So empty hours, empty days. It's a haunting way to start the monologue. As we fast forward from Drizzt's weaning years through his page prince years and arrive at the precipice of his 16th birthday, we find that it seemed like one long barren moment for him, punctuated by a sneaking adventure to look out over the magical lights of Menzoberranzan. The fluctuating light of Narbondel serving as a stark reminder of the emptiness of his early days. These simple trips seemed magical in comparison to his upbringing. The sound of a whip cracking is enough to bring back memories of the fangs sinking into his skin. The magical energy coursing through the body makes the muscles pull and snap beyond their limits. A brutal picture he paints about the way he was raised, the way Drow are raised, yet still he felt lucky that Vierna was his wiener mother. Is that what we're saying?
Weaning mother.
Weaning mother, sorry.
Wean mother, but yeah.
There's there's a red underline under that.
That's because it's, I believe, a term that was made up for the book. Maybe.
I don't know. I don't know. So during his first 10 years, even though she was on the cusp of becoming a high priestess, she never showed the intense wickedness of Matron Malice, or Briza for that matter. Perhaps in these moments she allowed a more gentle side to show through. Even though she was the kindest of his sisters, her words still dripped with the venom of Lolth, as surely as any cleric. So how could she forsake her training for the benefit of one mere male child? So if any joy were found in those 10 years, surely they were obscured by the unrelenting assault of Menzoberranzan's wickedness. Hidden from his mind, such memories could not be recalled. The next 6 years brought a vivid, singular memory, easily recallable at will, to serve as a reminder of his time served at court as a page prince. The lone image is one of his feet, for a page prince is never allowed to raise his gaze.
I gotta admit, when we go through these inner monologues and stuff, these are some of my favorite parts of the books. Like when you get taken outside of the narrative that Robert crafts and writes in the story, and then gives you just
it's raw,
stark
Drizzt.
insight.
It's just raw Drizzt. It's exactly what he's thinking. It's awesome.
Yeah, it almost makes me, now you always think like, oh, one more page, right? One more page.
Right.
It's like, I just want to get one more part down so I can
Exactly.
just end it and then start with another piece of Drizzt's insights. Like, I love it.
Yeah, it's great. So that is our first insight check. We're going to take this right into the Drizzt.
The Drizzt is the part of the show where we take a look at this week's chapter and we give you the Drizzt of it. As we start the chapter, we see the training of the Drow in effect. Drizzt goes to meet Matron Malice. Briza is herding him along with the snake whip, but Drizzt entertains no thoughts of revenge against her or any Drow female. The consequences are simply too high. Drizzt keeps his eyes on the floor, like a good Drow, and entertains himself by drawing doodles on the floor with his bare foot. The infravision leaves a trace like a kid with a sparkler.
I love how you brought that up. Sorry.
Because
it's perfect. Like that's exactly how a sparkler is, right? You wave it around in the darkness and you can write your name and it kind of hangs out there for a brief moment, and just thinking of the heat from his foot sticking into the ground for just that little moment, like that's a perfect correlation there.
And it's also a good look at his childishness, because, like, look,
Right.
if Zachnophane's off on the side making pictures with his foot, everybody in the whole room, no one's questioning, because, look, Zach will crush everybody.
Right.
But they're going to look at him like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
But, like, Drizzt, they don't even pay attention to, because he's just some little male Drow over
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
One of the designs is Briza being bitten on the rump by an enormous viper. I feel like if Briza would have seen that, he would have been bitten by a viper or 6 at the end of her whip.
Exactly.
We find out in the chapter that this is Drizzt's 16th birthday, and Matron Malice demands that he meet her gaze, which is odd because, as we found in the inner monologue, a page prince's eyes are kept down, fit only for crawling things on the floor, except for spiders, of course.
Don't look at those spiders.
Drizzt is surprised upon meeting her eyes that Matron Malice is cool, calm, and collected. No anger heating her face at all. Did she make him a cake for his birthday? Nope. Today his prize is to shed the page prince title and assume his place as second boy. When his eyes slip just a little bit, Matron Malice quickly corrects his attention with a swing of her hand that puts him down hard. Not quite the same inspiration, but inspiration just the same. Malice pulls him to his feet by his throat and explains to continue acting as a servant would bring dishonor to the house, and she would put needles in his purple eyes. Ooh. He knows this would give her great joy. Such a motherly lady that Matron Malice is.
Right?
Like, after we had gone through the previous chapter explaining his weaning, to then find out the lady that gave birth to him is that vicious. Like, wow.
I know, right? And so it's like, Drizzt, hold on to Vierna and just,
keep that innocence, buddy.
Yep.
We then find ourselves Zach and Vierna. She's explaining to him the difference in Drizzt that set him apart and maybe above other male children. He's intelligent and talented, but also stubborn and headstrong. Subservience did not come easy, even at Breeze's hand. This makes Zach Nafane smile. They arrive in an anteroom with the entire family gathered. Vierna announces Zach Nafane to the matron, and they take their place beside her throne. Drizzt stands stripped to the waist as Breeza brings a pawafwi to drape across his shoulders while chanting incantations, and a look of elation spreads across his childish face. Drizzt looks around with his newfound privilege and greets Zach Nafane, much to the horror of Vierna and the anger of Matron Malice. Zach Nafane has to use his hand to keep himself from smiling for fear that he's going to erupt in laughter, which is a very, very un-Drow-like response.
Right?
Judging by the anger lighting up Matron Malice's face, it would not be wise to do so. Zach Nafane quickly steps forward to deflect her anger and tells him that now is the time for his training. Matron Malice remembers the meeting from 16 years ago with Matron Ben-Ray and tells Zach that Drizzt will only learn the basics at his hands, as she has designs of sending him to Sorcerer, so they may take advantage of his intelligence and gain honor for the house. Zach Nafane sees little value in wizardry, so he pulls out a coin and asks Drizzt, maybe test it. He tells Drizzt to flip the coin. Drizzt flips it, catches it with both hands at once. 1 coin each hand. Then Zach Nafane has him put 2 coins on each thumb. Drizzt easily catches them both as well. Zach Nafane realizes that this ambidextrous feat will serve Drizzt best at melee Magthir as a fighter. Matron Malice, though, is not as easily convinced and holds reservations, as Zach Nafane may be physically talented in battle and the bedroom, but also a pain in her royal backside with his contempt for the Spider Queen. Zach continues the display with 3 coins on each hand, and Drizzt casually grabs the right 3 in each hand, forcing even Matron Malice to begrudgingly acknowledge Drizzt's grace. Zach stacks 5 coins on each of Drizzt's thumbs, holding them for an extra few moments to ensure that the warmth from his hands will light up the coins so that Drizzt in his infravision will be able to see them better. He commands them to catch them all or face Sorcerer, where he does not belong. Drizzt obeys, is confused but willing. The coins soar into the air and he grabs the first 2 for each hand easily. And then he quickly discerns the scattering pattern of the remaining coins is going to demand more. In a blur of motion, he spins in a circle and with a grin presents 5 coins in each palm. I always think of like the kung fu movies when that comes up and the training, and it's just how effortlessly that has to come to Drizzt. Everybody inside of that room is just blown away. Even Malice, who wants nothing more than to show up House Ben-Ray and their archmage of the city that lights Narbondale, even she has to realize that this kid's a warrior.
Right. And so you brought up kung fu movie. Yes, totally. That totally fits there. Like the kung fu, I'm just like, why not show his promise by giving him like a sword and like having him go at something? And I don't know. I felt like coin flipping. I'm like, well, this is kind of like, I don't know. But once you said kung fu movie, it's like, oh no, this is totally a kung fu movie move here. Like that's exactly what they would do, and it's perfect.
If you think about it, if he were to give him a sword right away, the child would have no idea what to do with it. He would flail.
Exactly.
He would have no form, no grace. But what he does is present him basically with a skills challenge and realizes that he has grace, he's deft of hand, he has good speed, balance, footwork. It's all presented in simply catching a coin.
Right.
Simply, I say, but I think I'd have problems with 1 coin each hand, if we're being honest.
I know, right? And 10 coins all together, and then you have to catch them all in the correct hand and everything.
Right. Now, while spinning, like if he would have simply done a backflip, landed on 1 foot, and went ta-da, it still couldn't have been much more impressive.
Right. I mean, do a backflip and catch 1 coin, and I would be very impressed. I don't think I caught the fact that he warmed some of the coins. Or did he warm all of them?
He warmed them all. So when he put them on his hand, it was the first time with the 5 coins. He holds his hands there a little longer. And I thought that was a really cool thing to bring up because the body heat from his hands would transfer to the coins. And if you have infravision, the biggest thing or the biggest benefit that you could give somebody is to let them see the targets clearly. And a coin doesn't carry heat. So when he imbues that warmth in it, it glows just a little bit more than it normally would.
So now is Zach trying to be kind of like tricky here? Is he trying to like he's trying to make it easier, right? So I mean, I guess my point is Malice would also be able to see that the coins are brighter, right?
Yeah, but that's where I think that he didn't use a spell or anything else. You know what I mean? It was just simply, instead of just placing them there, I took an extra 2 seconds, just to give him that little bit of an advantage.
Okay, yeah.
Even Matron Malice is suitably impressed and declares he shall be a fighter and perhaps one day become weapons master of the house. The only Drow not impressed? That's Risen, who's acutely aware that everyone but Drizzt knows Drizzt is not his child.
What? I think this is the first time we heard about this, right? In this chapter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do kind of like draw allusions to it where you realize that Drizzt, or not Drizzt, Risen is, he's kind of like weak and got no spine, kind of like all the actual, characteristics of a Drow that most female Drow like. Push him around, keep him down.
Yep.
And then you see that they're, Drizzt obviously is not the same. So they draw little hints here and there, but I think they really bring it out in this chapter.
Yeah, so, I mean, we find out who his dad is, right?
I don't know if they explicitly say it, but yeah, I believe so. Because they do. Yeah, no, they do. Because they mention that from his loins. Right.
Right, yeah. So we do find out that Zaknafein is Drizzt's father, and things just start clicking into place here, right? I mean, we're seeing a young Drizzt that is very unique from other Drow males. Just very innocent in a lot of his ways. He's I don't want to say I don't want to make him sound dumb, but he's like not picking up on a lot of the customs of Drow society, right?
Yeah, the indoctrination is not going as well as hoped in certain ways. And it makes sense again when you understand the mindset and the ethos of Zaknafein, who has no time for the preachings of Lolth or the machinations of the Drow and what they go through in order to scheme and plot. He's got no time for it. And it's like, well, does he have no time for it, or does it not stick? The same way you see it doesn't stick with Drizzt.
It would be really cool to get a little bit of a backstory on Zaknafein and see just exactly how similar to Drizzt he was when he was his age, when Zaknafein was as young as Drizzt. Because I feel like it probably starts as I really don't understand this, I'm not catching on, and then it's eventually just like, no, this isn't right kind of thing. But anyway, sorry.
It's either that or just being repeatedly beaten over the head with a board that you see doesn't really suit your temperament. I mean, I know that they do have further books down the road, insights into Zaknafein that, hopefully one day we're going to get to. Yeah. But inside of this book and at chapter 6 so far, we have not yet learned.
Yeah.
Zaknafein then leads Drizzt down to the large training hall and explains there's only one room here, which is kind of funny because Drizzt looks around and says, but look, there's 3. And Zach says, nope, one is his private quarters and they are off limits, as is the war room, to which access has to be earned, not given. So Drizzt looks at the cramped room, as Zaknafein explains that this is going to be where he sleeps, eats, and will relieve himself. And it had better be clean if he does. Drizzt attempts to use his newfound status to ask about his mother, with Zaknafein quickly correcting him by giving him a quick fist-sized nap.
Yeah.
Puts him out for a little bit. Zach offers a second nap if Drizzt cannot control his wagging tongue. A curled hand at his side is all that's needed for Drizzt to concede. Zaknafein shows Drizzt a most magnificent rack of weapons of all sorts, leaving the youth wide-eyed in wonderment. He commands Drizzt to take his time and pleasure getting to know the weapons, for when training ends, one of them will become Drizzt's trusted companion. Zach leaves Drizzt with the weapons and looks back with a chuckle, seeing the boy awkwardly handle the heavy halberd. The chuckle quickly fades as he remembers that his duty will be to turn Drizzt into a killer. Alone in his chambers, Zach wonders if all Drow children possess such innocence, much like Vierna did in the earlier chapter. Having trained 1,000 young Drow before him, Zach wonders now if Drizzt is unique and why. Because they share the same blood? Or perhaps the years with his wean mother. Zach falls asleep wondering what might have influenced the Drow more. And then he dreams a nightmare of the screams of children being hacked apart by other Drow that Zach Nefane had trained. He awakens from the horror, determined to believe that this one will be different.
I love the end of that chapter.
Right? And, obviously that's where it does go out to point out, we do find out Zach is his father.
Right.
But to see how he looks at his responsibility inside of the society is really sad. I mean, Zach is a great warrior. Everybody celebrates him. Everybody thinks he's just the bomb, And Zach is torn and conflicted because earlier when we saw he will not watch the kill squads go in and hack up the nobles, you now find out that one of the further reasons he refuses to do so, he trained those warriors. Right? He is responsible for the vicious acts that they take out on the innocent, really. I mean, obviously not all Drow are innocent and they all have to be treated as such, but in regards to that, they're still children Drow. And see, Zach Nefane does wonder about, do they all have that innocence? Is he responsible for snuffing out the innocence of so many young Drow? Not maybe firsthand, but by proxy. Right. Ooh, it's horrifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's got to have a lot of sleepless nights.
Yeah.
So that's going to bring the Drizzt up nicely, tie it with a bow. We're going to slide that into the dim light reel. Why don't you take it away, buddy?
The dim light reel, that's where we cast darkness on our favorite parts of the chapter and dim light all of our favorite characters, events, descriptions, and more. So I'm going to scroll on down to my dim light, and my dim light for chapter 5, nope, we are in chapter 6 now. I got the wrong chapter listed here, is Drizzt's transition from being a page boy to being a second boy. So Drizzt has spent his entire life figuring out the rules of being a page prince. Did I say page boy? Page prince?
Maybe.
I might have. I have page prince right there. But anyway, so the rules of the page prince is basically serve all the nobles in House Do'Urden, keep your mouth shut, keep your eyes on the floor, but avert your eyes should a spider enter your gaze.
You know how hard that's got to be when you think about it? Like anything that's got legs and crawls and enters your peripheral, you've got to automatically assume at first glance might be a spider.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think it said at one point, like, the most interesting thing is, like, watching all those creepy crawly things going by. But if it's a spider, don't look at it. So we know that Drizzt did have a difficult time learning those rules to begin with, right? So he had this natural tendency to look at whoever was talking to him until Briza basically beat that instinct out of him. And so now the poor guy he's reached 16 and he has to figure out new rules as he's been promoted to second boy. And that means all of a sudden that he's allowed to look at people in the eyes. So Matron Malice is trying to talk to Drizzt, informing him of his new title. She's insisting that he maintain eye contact during this discussion. He's not a servant anymore. And to act as one, he's going to, like you said, he's going to dishonor the family. So for 16 years, looking upon her face would have resulted in a thrashing, and now he's expected to make this change in an instant where all of a sudden he's allowed to look at her in the face. So
there's a crazy bit of like mental warfare when you think about it, because it's really like it's leading you to water and teaching you to drink. And then after a while, when you go to drink the water, it's backhanding you hard enough to let you know that you do not bend down to drink the water. Like,
right.
But wait, you told me every other time that's what I do. And it's like the ups and downs really to keep him like unbalanced and unsure of his station in life and this family.
Yeah. And I can tell, like, I can say, I myself, I don't know. Like when I'm in a conversation with someone.
Are you a page prince?
I feel like I'm more a page prince than I am a second boy. I don't always like it. It is difficult for me to maintain eye contact. I have to actually work to do that, and to think that I would get like slapped in the face if I like dropped my gaze, that would be, oh man. Anyway.
Right? I'm ironically the other way around. Once I found out that most people don't like to make eye contact, I've always like forced myself to just like maintain eye contact. Like even when I'm playing poker at a table, you know, people try to hide tells. I was like, no, I'm staring right at you. Look at my eyes.
I got you.
Right here.
Okay, all right. I thought you were saying like, you know that a lot of people don't like maintaining eye contact, so you're going to work at like making yourself better to maintain eye contact. But no, you're going the next step and saying like, you don't like this, so I'm going to do it.
Yep. It also works to hide what you feel. You know, so like if you're feeling meek and diminutive, well, no, I'm not. I'm staring right at you.
Right.
I'm not hiding emotions. I'm all right here on the surface.
So during this discussion, I think I said he instinctively drops his gaze numerous times. He does catch himself once and brings his gaze back to Malice just in time to get smacked upside the head, knocking him down to the ground. He does maintain his gaze the whole time. Like, did he finally learn, like, just within that moment? Because, I mean, I say finally, like, it was like 3 times, but maybe he learned now. So later in this chapter, though, Matron Malice summons the family to a formal meeting. There, Drizzt receives his very own Pawafui in a very ceremonious fashion. Briza chanting incantations, like you said, during the whole process. And the second after Drizzt is donned with his new cloak, he turns to Zaknafein without hesitation, and he's like, "Hey, dude, it's me, Drizzt. I can look at you and talk to you now. My mom said so."
And then a pin can be heard hitting the ground for miles away.
Oh my word. I love that moment. So right after Drizzt realizes his mistake, I mean, he sees Malice's head is probably so hot that it's not even registering on the infravision scale, right? It's probably she's probably just fuming to the point where she's about to go nuclear.
And it shows you the difference, because right when he first saw her face, cool, calm, and collected, she had no anger, and then in an instant she is like 0 to 100. Boom, real quick.
Yep. Vierna's jaw is touching the floor. Zach is literally using his hand to pinch his lips together and prevent himself from laughing. Briza, so quick to use her whip, is fumbling because she's so surprised by her brother's actions. Like, just that whole scene just makes them feel so much more human. Just in a way, because it's like nothing is going right here. Everyone's just like, what? I don't know. It's just so goofy. I love it though. I love it.
It's almost like a good comedic moment inside of a very dark and dangerous place. You just get that and that moment of brevity.
And if there is ever a comedic moment, it's most likely going to be my dim light reel. I love comedy. I love when things just don't go the way they're supposed to in a funny way. It's great. So this poor Drow, like I said, he's trying to come up with these new rules, and he trying to figure out these new rules, and he's just too confident for his own good, just jumping right into that conversation with Zaknafein. And so he also seems to be a little bit more excited. He seems to be excited that the strictness of the rules seem to be lessening, and that he's branching out. And but it kind of got to a point where it almost feels like he forgets what it means to be a male in a Drow society. So it just made that scene all the more funny. But anyway, that is my dim light. Jeffrey, what do you have for the dim light this week?
Well, I decided to go with the struggle of Zaknafein. Since he was first introduced in the book, he's been a favorite of mine, and probably favorite of everybody's. But I digress. I think that the moral struggle within him is so intriguing. Like, when we see him in this chapter, he's walking with Vierna, who is explaining how Drizzt is not like the other Drow. Like I said before, he shows intelligence, strong constitution, struggles with the simple act of keeping his gaze on the floor. This defiance is something that Zaknafein is known for, so he sees a little bit of himself reflected in his son. The similarities between Zaknafein's view on Drizzt and Vierna's experience last chapter get even more similar. Drizzt looks upon the weapon master with that childlike smile, an innocent smile, as he explains his promotion to the weapons master. This is the moment that Zack sees for himself that Drizzt is able to maintain a bit of himself throughout the beatings and the training that he's received this far. And it makes him almost break out in laughter, which is odd to see a Drow express joy without murder being present. Without murder being present.
It was almost present.
It was close, but Frieza can't get to that whip fast enough. This is exactly the difference in Zack Nafane that draws me to him.
Yeah.
Zack steps forward to defend Drizzt from Matron Malice and champion the cause of him becoming a warrior instead of a wizard. I think part of Zack Nafane wants to spend more time around Drizzt, his son, in order to try and shelter him from the wicked world of the Drow that he has such contempt for. I feel like he's definitely proud of his son and maybe expressing just a little bit of actual love, which seems a bit blasphemous among the Drow. The struggle comes when showing Drizzt the weapons, seeing the joy in his face and realizing what lies ahead for him after his training with Zack Nafane is finished. Much like Vierna in the previous chapter, Zack wonders if all Drow are like Drizzt, before they are conditioned to hate, or if he's unique. And if he is, why? Was it the time that he spent with Vierna? The fact that he is Zack Nafane's son? Or is it something else? Zack Nafane's trained 1,000 Drow children before Drizzt, who have gone on to do terrible things as all Drow do. His nightmare, at the end, is horrifying as he hears the screams of children, like the ones that were hidden in the hidden room at the fall of House Devere, which were then shredded by soldiers Zack had trained, just like he will train Drizzt. Zack is determined that Drizzt will be different. This is essentially, for me, it's the nature versus nurture argument.
Oh, totally.
Is it Drizzt? Is it who Drizzt is? Or how he's raised? Can Zack Nafane cultivate the best version of Drizzt? Or will Drizzt forsake his potential and become just another Drow? Zack Nafane clearly has contempt for Drow, yet he's proud of his son and concerned that he will become that which Zack Nafane loathes. It's fascinating.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah, it brings us before we had the talk of political oppressions and oppressions of people and how to keep people down and those stupid surface elves. And now we're looking at, a psychological expose inside of a character and, nature versus nurture, what leads to who we become. And it's like, it's all set in this just fantastical world. And I'm here for it.
Yeah.
So, now that I've put a little bow on that, it's pretty dark over there. Don't be too afraid to go dungeon delving.
The Dungeon Delve, the part of the show where we link this chapter with our favorite tabletop RPG. Now, we play 5e. Jeffrey, I don't know if we necessarily want to be saying... this episode's going to come out, in 2 weeks on the 30th, right? January 30th. So by then...
Barring complications, yes.
Maybe they'll have everything figured out by then, but I know that Wizards of the Coast was coming out with a new... What do you call that? A new license that could possibly make things a little difficult to publish things for Dungeons and Dragons if you're a third party, without giving Wizards of the Coast a little bit of a cut of your shares. So, but anyway,
or the ability to just give them your entire intellectual property.
Right.
But no, I did read somewhere, and I don't know the whole ins and outs of it all, where it's going to land. But I did read somewhere that the backlash from the fans has caused the Wizards of the president of Hasbro, CEO,
right,
the guy in Hasbro who does things, to kind of pull that back and walk off that statement just a little bit. I think when he said it, he probably was like, "Hey guys, this is how we make money. Check this out."
Yep.
And then when everybody was like, "No, you don't," it was like, "Whoa, wow, that many people care."
Apparently, there was a mass exodus from D&D Beyond because of it, the subscription service and everything, and so I don't know. Well, we continue to enjoy 5e. We have the materials to. I feel like as players, it doesn't necessarily affect us directly, but I guess if we start making money off of this podcast and we say, hey, we love D&D, then they'll probably come asking for money. I don't know exactly how that works. But anyway.
If you guys need to come and ask us for money from Wizards of the Coast, you can email us anywhere except for DrizztDoneRight@gmail.com.
Literally anywhere else.
We will get back to you when we get a moment.
So the Dungeon Delve, like I said, that's where we connect this chapter with our favorite tabletop RPG. So my Dungeon Delve this week is a very, very special one. This week, I'm going to be discussing our very first listener-submitted Dungeon Delve. So
I like that. I like that.
Thank you, Sevik the Grey, for your suggestion. I know.
That was one of the guys I gave a shout out to earlier on for the Discord.
Right, he's new, right? And he jumps in. And
yep. If you bring something to the table that we find interesting, we worked it into the ep. That's amazing. I like it.
That was not planned that way. Like, you had that section all put together. I had this section all put together. There happened to be that overlap. Hey, Sevik showed up and he delivered, right? I did put a message out there where I was just kind of like, I read this chapter and I didn't see any like real clear D&D connections. And Sevik was like, hey, I got you. This is what you should do. So let's go into it here. So for some chapter context first, remember that in this chapter, Malice wants Drizzt to attend Sorcerer to become a powerful wizard, while Zaknafein sees Drizzt's natural ability that would make him a good weapon wielder. So the question is, how do you persuade a matron mother? That has to be a difficult task, right? I mean, this is like the matron of House Do'Urden, 9th house of Menzoberranzan out of 64 houses, right? So she has to be extremely powerful, extremely wise, extremely intelligent. So that has to be a difficult task.
Also quite violent, very intimidating. And I would prefer that you try to persuade her before I do.
So, of course, in the chapter, Zach leads Drizzt through a number of dexterous acts involving coins and catching them, and which ultimately convinces her that Zach should be able to train the second boy. Sevik brought up an awesome point concerning this event, this plot point. So when it comes to the tabletop game, we have a few different ways that you're able to approach a situation much like this. All right, when you would like to persuade someone in the game, the Dungeon Master might ask you to role-play out your persuasion. What exactly would you like to say to the non-player character? How exactly would you say it? What is your body language? Your DM might want you to actually role-play this out. These are all things that the DM could then score when you're persuading the NPC. And depending on how you roleplay the situation, the Dungeon Master might just be like, yeah, you did good. And you were successful on the persuasion without the need of rolling any dice, which is something that I really like that you're able to do. But here's what is really beautiful about this game. You don't have to be charismatic to be able to make a successful persuasion check. If you're uncomfortable with the role-playing aspect of the game, the Dungeon Master might just have you make a charisma persuasion check with you roll the d20 to see if you're successful, right? The DM can then describe how you were successful or how you were unsuccessful depending on how you rolled. I know sometimes... Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's part of, too, why every group needs a good Dungeon Master, right? So everybody loves to play. Everybody loves to roll dice and hack up little goblins and go treasure hunting, right? Well, most people do, but it's really an experience that can be tied together by having a legitimately good Dungeon Master. Like I know for shouting out that you do the voices, you make up characters, you come up and breathe life into the surrounding people. So yeah, we get to play our characters. We get to get as rich as we want in it, but you also help bring to life the rest of the world. And could you imagine having five is it Critical Role that uses the voice actors, having 5 players who are fantastic, and they're like, "Well, I will go and do this," and then the dungeon master's like, "Persuasion check. Yep,
Right.
you got it."
Yeah.
It's like a wet fart in a blanket. Like that's no fun for anybody.
Right. So I will say like, but what makes a good DM though? I feel like one of the best things, or one thing that makes a DM the best that they can be, is really just knowing their players, and knowing how they want to play, right? And like,
Well, yeah, you have to have a little bit of selflessness, right? Not selfishness,
right,
little selflessness, because it's not so much about how you want the game to go. It's about how to best weave together the personalities before you so that everybody gets to enjoy it.
exactly. Some people might want to. I was actually looking it up in the Dungeon Master Manual before. A couple hours ago. Where was it? I should have left this open. There was a section toward the beginning of the Dungeon Master book. It's on page 6, actually. It's very early on, where it's know your players. How do your players want to play? Do they want to focus on their acting, exploring, investigating, fighting, optimizing, problem solving, or storytelling? Like, there's a lot of different ways you can play this game. And just one of the best ways that you can be a DM is just know your players. Know what everyone wants to do. That makes it fun for them. And, sometimes it makes it difficult if you have 2 players in the group that want to do totally different things. And so it can kind of, they can kind of get on each other's nerves because, you're metagaming too much. And the other person's just like, I'm just trying to have a good time here. I'm just trying to role play. And, so the DM
That's where one of them gets eaten by a dragon.
So I know, going back to this charisma check versus role playing, sometimes what I would do is I would even have my players do both, as you probably know. So it isn't quite so like if the player role plays out what they want to say. We're not the best role players. That's perfectly fine. We're trying. We're having fun. But maybe the conversation isn't quite enough to fully persuade the NPC. So then as a DM, what I do is I take that persuasion and I say, well, instead of having to roll a 15, now you have to roll a 10 because it was good, but it wasn't perfect. And it kind of makes that persuasion check just a little easier for them to roll. So anyway, I also wanted to go into this idea that tabletop RPGs, they're designed to get us out of our own bodies and into someone new. And also into these fantastical worlds, right? But we're being put into someone new, someone spectacular, someone quirky, someone whatever, right? You get to choose who your character is, so you get to be that person. So not everybody that plays is immediately comfortable or even capable of thinking as a completely different individual. So that's one of the reasons role-playing has been used in all sorts of therapies throughout the years. It can help you see the world through the eyes of others. It can lead to better communication skills and just so much more. So if your DM asks you to role play out a situation, this is kind of going back to the idea of your DM should know their people, right? They should know their players. If your DM asks you to role play out a situation, if you aren't totally comfortable with it, that's fine. Just ask if you can describe what you're trying to do and roll for it instead. Heck, again, the whole point is you're being put into someone else's body, okay? Like in the game, if you're trying to throw a dagger at a goblin, your DM isn't going to have you throw an actual dagger at an actual target, right?
At least not most of the time, probably.
That's kind of getting...
Drywall does get expensive to replace.
So why would you be expected to role play out a persuasion, when maybe that's not your strong suit, being a charismatic person, right? Now, I mean, the whole throwing a dagger thing, that's kind of getting more into LARPing territory, which I have nothing against. Quite the opposite, actually. I know you brought it up on the Discord a couple weeks back.
Can't wait to pelt people with sandbags that are marked red. Fireball! Bam! Right in the face. Sorry, Gary.
I would be really interested to at least observe, maybe try once. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, that's my dungeon delve. That's our first listener submitted dungeon delve. Thank you, Sevik the Gray, for your suggestion. I hope that I touched on that sufficiently. So, hey, if anyone else would like to have their name and suggestion read out during the show, make sure to send us an email or join our Discord and get into the discussion. And you just might hear your name and your suggestion on the next show. Jeffrey, your dungeon delve for this week.
Well, I chose to try to keep things a little basic and simple and how to choose your weapon, right? Dungeons and Dragons is a game that can be as complex or as simple as you want it to be. The world is our oyster, at least until Hasbro tries to take it all away. Your character is uniquely yours, and you control the backstory, the appearance. You build them from the ground up, and since the game includes dungeons, inside of which sometimes there be dragons, it's important to choose something to defend yourself with. As we saw in Zach Nafane's armory, you have a wide array of weapons. To start, there are simple weapons and martial weapons. Simple weapons require little to no training. It's like clubs, daggers, light crossbows. They also do happen to deal less damage. Damage isn't the only thing, though, that you're going to want to consider when choosing a weapon. It's definitely important. However, you do have to hit in order to deal damage. So martial weapons, they include longbows, great axes, long swords. They deal a whole lot more damage, but they do need training. And not all classes are going to start with proficiency in them. So remember to build accordingly. I always like to think about it as, like Drizzt has 2 scimitars, right? So whips them up and he's
not
great.
Yet he doesn't.
No, but he will.
He will.
I saw it on the cover. But most chances, if you're starting out as a level 1 character, you're not going to be able to just proficiently double wield a weapon. So you're going to have to figure out, at least until then, what are you going to use? And as a recourse, you know what? You don't want to be disarmed in combat with nothing to use. So I know that we found ourselves early on in one game having everybody essentially use swords, clubs, something of that nature. And then we faced a flying bad guy. And nobody had anything to hit it.
Like, what do we do?
So we had to resort to throwing objects at it and attempting to hit it in the air, which, again, is a very weird mechanic if you just aren't prepared for it.
Yep.
So Drow, they've got proficiency in hand crossbows, rapiers, and short swords. This makes sense logically, given their size and agility. Do you want to get into the thick of the fighting? Do you want to keep a distance? Do you want to dance through melee like a ninja? Also, remember, if you do get a ranged weapon because you don't want to get into the melee, you're going to need ammo. So you've got to purchase it, and you've got to make sure you're not just firing blindly into the sky, because when you no longer have any bolts for your crossbow, you now have an improvised club.
Now, Jeffrey, you aren't required to keep track of ammo, are you?
No, my DM is a very nice individual who does not make me have to buy an arrow every time I go to the armory or town.
I mean, I would half expect you guys to, but I definitely do not keep on top of you guys with that.
It's one of the things that, again, what you're talking about earlier, know your party. We would all have bows and no arrows after like the second day of adventuring. It's either that or we'd all buy so many arrows we'd be too encumbered in order to continue. What do you have in your backpack? 900 arrows, Johnny.
Which, you want to bring up encumbrance. I don't keep track of that.
Thankfully, again, because then I would never get treasure out of the dungeon. I would be trying to drag it.
He walked out with the entire dragon's horde.
And the dragon. Another important thing to consider is your damage modifier. So as a drow, most likely you're not going to have strength as your highest stat, unless you are this buff, ripped, massive Conan the Drowbarian.
Like Breeza.
Right? She probably would have a high strength check now that you mention it. But the Drow not having strength would make the large halberd that Drizzt grabs first just a bit awkward, as we see. Just judging another weapon, say the scimitar, for example, it allows dexterity to be your damage modifier, as the slicing weapon is going to be used more with finesse than with power. One thing that a friend of mine always brought up to me when I was growing up is that, I always thought Dungeons and Dragons is it's all on the sheets drawn down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, if you look at life, you can look at it like Dungeons and Dragons. I am a 6'3", 260-pound male. Do I have proficiency climbing trees? Well, maybe as a child. He's like, so if you ran over to that tree and tried to climb it, I'd set your skill check at about a 12. You know how to do it. You've got decent upper body strength, but you're also a little heavy and got to pull it up. It's like, so the way the mechanic plays out inside of D&D is much in the same way. I'm going to attack you. I want to do damage. How is the damage done? Well, it's slicing and stabbing. It's not so much like, swinging like a club and trying to beat you to death. Well, then I don't need strength. I need dexterity. And my character's build would reflect that. One last thing to remember. Everything has a cost and a price. Sounds similar, but the price might be in gold, while the cost might mean that you're not able to use a shield because both hands are in use.
Right.
I hope you enjoyed this cursory look into weapon choosing. But remember, you create your character in D&D. It's one of the most beautiful things about it. You're not limited to meta builds. You can choose to build something outside the mold and enjoy the oddities and complexities that it's going to bring. Nobody says you can't be a buff drow who swings a great axe with savagery.
If the dice roll well, you can do it.
I mean, I know for me, some of my favorite characters have always been the oddity, right? I played a character that was a Ninja Turtle, essentially, and I wanted to be a grapple-based monk. I mean, who really wants to get in there and fight with their hands and grapple everything? I thought it was just such a neat mechanic.
You ruined so many things with that guy. What was his name?
Taz.
Man, you ruined so many encounters by running in and grappling the guy. I'm just like, I can't compete with that strength.
Yep, I built myself a tank that was very strength-based. He was a turtle, and he would just run in and grab things, and hopefully other people were able to come in and stab. But I would, if I had to use weapons, most of the time they were improvised weapons.
Yep.
Grabbing sconces off the wall, throwing tables, chairs, whatever, whatever's nearby and handy.
Yeah, but I mean, I hear a lot, and I don't want to sound like I'm throwing shade at people that do this, but what do you call it? Like min-maxing, where it's like, you're choosing the race, the best race that goes with the best class to do whatever, and then
that's what I was saying with a meta build, where you're like, right. You're going to be an archer. You should choose the race that gives the best bonus to agility, dexterity, and then you want to choose the class that gives you the. You don't have to. You can completely build it the other way. Like Absolutely. We have a bard in our current party that can't sing. How weird is it to come across a bard that doesn't use vicious mockery at every turn? But I can honestly tell you, I don't know if he listens to the show, I thoroughly enjoy the fact that it's a different type of character. The way he's forced to play it.
Yep. Yeah, he
what was it? The first week he kept getting encumbered by fatigue because he wouldn't sleep because his character was so nervous and anxious. He was specifically giving himself limitations and handicaps that affected his gameplay. And again, I, as a fan of watching it, loved it. Thought it was great.
Oh, he did a great job. I mean, he's doing a great job. I really enjoy watching where Shaddy goes as we run around the area. So, well, Jeffrey, I guess that just about does it for episode 6 here. So, thank you everyone for listening. Remember that if you like the show, give us a 5-star rating. Also, make sure you get the most out of this podcast. So pick up a copy of the book and read along with us.
Don't have time to read? Remember, that audiobook right there, touch of the finger, tap of the keyboard. Take it with you wherever you go. Vacation in the Maldives, going to Japan to meet Hiraku. Share it wherever you may go. When you're done reading the chapter, shoot us an email, drizztdoneright@gmail.com. Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, not welcome. Or you can log on to our Discord and join in the discussion. Remember, we still got that link inside of the podcast description. Fire in through there. We'd love to hear from you.
We would love to hear from you. So, Jeffrey, it's been a blast. Now, it's time to say goodbye.
Blast? Uh-oh. Better watch out for cave-ins.
I cast
Guess we better
fireball.
make a quick exit. farewell, friends. Be fair, be well. Play fair, be well.